Stolen Education is a documentary that follows Enrique Aleman Jr. as he uncovers the events that led up to and discusses the 1956 court case Hernandez et al. Versus Driscoll Consolidated Independent School District. Lupe Aleman, Enrique's mother, was forced to repeat the first grade for 3 years. It was not because of her inability to understand and speak English or low academic achievement, but because she was a Mexican-American student. She, along with 8 students, was involved in the Hernandez court case. Mexican-American students were forced to take a beginner, low, and high first grade, something that was unfortunately very common in the southwestern United States. At the time, school districts argued that it was justified and necessary because Latin children were deemed retarded and would affect white children's education. The person who started the case, Elbesa Hernandez, was the first and only mother to take the witness stand in 1956. She argued that her son was able to do second grade work and should be moved to the second grade. However, due to the law of the school, he was denied and was put in low first grade. After many times of talking to Mr. Green and still refusing to let her son be in the second grade, she took the situation to court. Enrique interviewed Geronimo Schubert, part of the Board of Trustees in Driscoll ISD. She argued that at the time, that is how it was done everywhere at the time. Enrique also interviews Esperanza Aleman, who went to a segregated Mexican school. She described the discrimination of Mexican Americans at the time, the example of not being allowed in Anglo's barbershop. Due to the abuse that Mexican American students endured for speaking Spanish at school, they decided not to teach their children Spanish and only teach English. Enrique Aleman Jr. interviewed 4 out of the 8 people that were involved in the Hernandez court case when they were children. Their ages ranged from 7 to 9 years old. The first person to be interviewed, Consuelo Galvan, was 8 years old when she testified. She described her experience as they drilled me what to say, what to do, and when to stand up. The second person to be interviewed was Marcelina Rivera. She was also 8 years old when she testified. In the interview, she mentions that she dropped out of school by 7th grade because her parents were ill. The third person interviewed was Carmen Aleman. She was 7 years old when she testified. She mentions the reasoning behind as to why people do not talk about the discrimination of Mexican American students. I want to get it past you and move on because there's no sense in dwelling over it. The last person interviewed was Ronaldo Trevino. He dropped out of high school and mentions that if he had been treated equal to his Anglo peers, he would have continued his education and graduated high school. At the end of the movie, the judge, James Alfred, in the court case ruled in favor of Hernandez and dismantled Driscoll's discriminatory system the next year. 2 of the original students in the court case, Olga and Mary Trevino, chose not to participate in the documentary.
Watching Stolen Education really opened my eyes and my mind because I did not realize what was happening in the past and is still happening in some districts now, I'm sure of. And it is really wrong and disturbing on how students are getting treated while they're children. Just because of your race and your appearance does not mean or show how smart you are and how much you know. And it was really wrong of that district to hold Latinos and Latinas in first grade for 3 years whenever they could have gone way further. After hearing that none of the students got tested for how much they knew or if they knew English or how smart they were, was really disturbing because the white children got to go on. They didn't have to be held back, but the Hispanic and Mexicans, they had to stay back just because of assumptions being made about them. Whenever half of them already knew English, they were bilingual. It's said in the documentary by one of the students who was there who testified.
But I would really want to get into the aftermath of what happened and the effects that the students had to live with. Not only from being held back a grade, which wasn't even being held back, but they were made to repeat the grade level because of their culture, language, without even being tested, which was totally unfair to them. But also the effects of not being allowed to speak their native language, which was Spanish. Even though it was something that they should have been proud of because they could at least speak 2 different languages when the Anglos could only speak 1. The effects that were left on the students that had to go through that was not only embarrassment because of them not being able to keep up with their culture or keep it from their future kids, but the lack of them being able to keep their culture up and going through generations because they didn't want them to suffer the same way that they did.
Ignacio M. Garcia from Brigham Young University mentions in the video, when the school district distributed money, they will take money from Mexican schools to enhance the white schools and tell the Mexican schools that there wasn't any money for them. It is very disappointing to see how even board members and districts as a whole mistreated Mexicans and Hispanics just because they are not smart enough according to them and because they are not able to succeed as white Americans do.
This film presented us with 3 counterclaims that the Driscoll School made during this case. All 3 of these claims are grossly unjust to not only the Hispanic students but to the white students as well. This film lets us have an insight on the effects that this case had on the students who had to live through this, and also shows us how the counterclaims that were made were completely racist and made to belittle the Hispanic students and keep them away from the white students. Not only this, but one of the counterclaims was also very obviously made so that the students would be less credible and therefore silenced. It is easy to see that throughout this movie we're presented with multiple scenarios of just how poorly Latino students have been treated in the past.
Stolen Education presents the full story and impact for the first time, featuring the personal accounts of most of those who were at the center of the court case. The film documents not only an important moment in Mexican American history, but also provides context to understand our current educational system's enduring legacy of segregation, discrimination, and racism.
This movie only shows us the effects of the students affected in Driscoll, but it is also said in the film that this lawsuit could have happened in any school in Texas at the time. Films like these are important to know about so that we as future educators can be aware of the mistakes that have been made in the past and make sure to never repeat them.